Families are complex things, even at the best of times. But when someone new comes into the fold, things really can get out of hand fast. This video shares 6 cases, 6 stepdads, and 6 reasons to make you think twice about who you welcome into your home and your family. These stories are real, and they are truly disturbing. Let's dive in. A quiet cul-de-sac in a sleepy corner of Derbyshire. One officer knocked on the door. Another circled to the side gate of the house, and then they saw him. The man made some insane claims that left the officers visibly puzzled. The looks of confusion they gave each other were clear, but moments later, inside that house, they found out he wasn't lying, and what they discovered inside would destroy the lives of everyone it touched. And to somehow make it even worse, it wasn't just senseless, it was entirely preventable. This should never, ever have happened. It was one of those early autumn Saturdays where the air feels softer, like summer hasn't fully left yet. On Shando's Crescent in Killamarsh, a quiet street just outside of Sheffield, 3 kids were running a makeshift sweet stall. Plastic tubs of lollipops, fizzy belts and sour cherries, sold to neighbours to raise money for a cancer charity. Lacey Bennett, 11 years old, was full of energy that day. She'd roped in her best friend Connie Gent, who was staying over for the weekend. Her big brother John Paul, who was 13, helped to set up the table, and their mum, Terry Harris, snapped pictures from the doorway. She posted to a community Facebook group, and the caption read, "Like to thank you for the lovely comments. The kids will be back out tomorrow at the park, or Shando's Crescent. Thank you for your support." And the comments rolled in. They said things like, "Well done to your kids. They were so polite. Credit to you. Lovely to see something so positive." And Terry tagged the 3 children in the posts so that they could read the compliments themselves. She was understandably proud, visibly, radiantly proud of the kids. That night, the children watched movies. Connie had asked to stay for a second night, and her mum said yes. Lacey had a thing for TikTok dances and boy bands. Connie loved music, and she was already talking about what they were going to wear for Halloween. John Paul was quieter, he was more observant, but he still enjoyed himself. He had a thing for bugs and insects, and he wouldn't hurt one even if it landed on him. Mother Terry, 35, worked in care. She had strong opinions about West Ham United, but that didn't compare to the strength of the bond that she had with her kids. Friends called her fiercely loyal. Her mum called her my rock. And that Saturday night was completely ordinary. It was fun, but it was peaceful. Nobody walking past the house would have sensed what was coming. In fact, no one possibly could have predicted something this unpredictable. The next day was supposed to be another day of sweet selling and sunshine. Terry Harris had finally started to feel like things were settling down. She had her new partner, Damien Bendel, and the pair met online after her last relationship ended. It was still early days, but he seemed calm and polite. He was a bit rough around the edges maybe, but he wasn't unkind. He moved into the family home during the summer of 2021. Terry was raising her kids mostly on her own. John Paul had now started secondary school. Lacey was growing up fast, with all the personality and sass of a girl who dreamt of TikTok fame. Life was full, but manageable. There was new school routines and a kind of domestic rhythm where laundry and packed lunches become the heartbeat to the full life of each week. To friends, new partner Damien didn't raise any alarm bells. To the legal system though, those bells should have been ringing loud and clear. And this is because when Damien Bendel gave Terry's address as his own, and he did it in order to satisfy a court-ordered curfew, the system accepted it. He was on probation, recently sentenced for an arson offence. The condition of his release was to be at home at night, and to stay inside that address. And in this instance, that address was Terry's. But no one warned her exactly what Damien was capable of. He had been labelled low risk to public, to partners and to children, but that label didn't come from a deep dive by the legal system. Instead, it came from surface level checks. It came from rushed paperwork. It came from boxes being ticked, without time to read the files beneath them. The probation office worker who'd reviewed his case had only been in the job for 6 months. She said that she simply didn't have time to scroll through his full criminal history, and this meant that whatever information was held there, Terry wouldn't find it out either. So the mother welcomed him into her home, just as she would have welcomed any other partner. She made space for him, she made dinners for him, and she made it work as a new family. And in doing so, she unknowingly let something else into her home. Something dangerous. Something the state had failed to catch. You see, in June of 2021, Damien Bendel walked out of court with a suspended sentence for arson. He'd set fire to a property in Swindon, an offence that was serious enough to land him behind bars. However, instead, he was allowed to return to the community, but he was now under a strict curfew. That curfew required him to stay each night at a specific address, and that was Terry Harris's home in Chandos Crescent, and the court accepted this. And from that moment on, her house would become part of his dark world. What no one realised though, not the judge, not the officer writing the report, not even Damien's own probation team, was that placing him there was like striking a match next to a pile of dry leaves. Damien's file should have set off alarms. He in fact had a documented history of violence. He'd previously been in relationships where DV was alleged. He was also flagged internally as posing a potential risk to children. But most of this information never actually made it to the report that the judge saw, and the probation officer who assessed him, she admitted later that she didn't read all of his documents. She only read 2 out of 10 risk reports. Some of that history was slightly hidden. It was tucked into the closed sections of the system that wasn't visible to all staff. So most of his history, potentially the darkest parts, were missed. But things only get worse. One EMS officer fitting Damien's electronic tag reported later that he'd said something chilling. If this relationship goes bad, I'll murder my girlfriend and her kids. However, this officer never passed that information on. There was no call. There was no email. Just silence. The staff in the probation service were either so overwhelmed or just so lax that these horrifying words didn't call for action. The probation teams in Swindon and Chesterfield were juggling hundreds of cases. One senior officer later testified that she herself was managing 350 people at once. It wasn't possible, she said, to do a deep dive on every one of those people. And so that is how Damien Bendel stayed under the radar, how this monster was deemed low risk, how he was somehow free to live in a home with a woman and 2 children, people who had no idea what he'd done, no idea what he'd said, who he was, nor what he may become. And by September, the cracks were no longer just bureaucratic, they were about to explode into the real world. Damien had now missed multiple appointments with his substance misuse worker, and he openly admitted to using mild substances and strong alcohol. However, his risk level wasn't reassessed, there was no intervention, there was no escalation of his case, and no alert to the fact that this man, now under curfew in a home with young children, was clearly spiralling. Probation staff described the workload as unmanageable. One probation worker said she was working at 170% capacity, which might help us to understand what happened next. Because despite being ordered to live at a house with 2 children, nobody contacted Terry Harris and nobody conducted safeguarding checks. There was no visit, there was no phone calls at Terry, and there was no confirmation by anyone that this placement was actually safe. A later inquiry would call this dangerous and entirely inappropriate, a missed opportunity to stop the chain of events before they happened. So, meanwhile, Terry went on with life as usual. She was just raising her kids, posting those sweet photos, and welcoming Connie for another night at the house. It was a home full of colour, family drawings on the fridge, school shoes lined by the door, tubs of sweeties half full from the weekend's fundraising. Things had moved pretty fast for the new couple. Terry fell pregnant, so the home was about to get even more hectic. And that's how it was, until early on Sunday morning. Then a phone call, not from that house, not from a neighbour, but from a relative of Damien Bendel, miles away in Dorset. The family member was worried. He'd called them to say that he'd hurt himself. Dorset police passed the information to Derbyshire. At 7:26 a.m, officers were dispatched to Chandos Crescent. At 7:39, they pulled up outside the house. And there, calmly waiting for them, stood Damien. He was standing outside the house when police arrived. He wore a zipped-up coat over a Chelsea football top. There was no panic, no rush, just a strange, eerie calm on his behalf. One officer approached, and Damien said softly, "I need the police and an ambulance, because I just killed 4 people." The officers looked at each other, still uncertain if he was serious or maybe just under the influence. They then noticed some red on his shirt. He told them that he was injured in the chest and stomach. They moved him round to the side of the house and asked him if there were any weapons inside. He told them no and then repeated, "I'm going back to prison again. I've murdered 4 people." The moment where the truth began to land is captured in full on the officers' body-worn cameras. In a moment, I'm going to play that full footage, and you'll see just how calmly he says it, how matter-of-fact he is, and how the officers, obviously stunned, begin to realise what they're about to walk into. But before I do, just remember this. Inside that house were 4 bodies laying amongst pure mayhem. All of them had no idea what was coming. All of them went to bed the night before, expecting to wake up to a new day, expecting to go out and sell more sweets together. Inside, it was John Paul that the officers found first. He was in the bathroom where he'd been getting ready to shower. Then Terry on the floor of the main bedroom, Lacey on the bed, and Connie in a separate room. All 4 had suffered catastrophic injuries. A claw hammer had been used. Lacey had also been violated, both before and after she was moved upstairs. Evidence showed that she tried to fight, that she did suffer. Damien, of course, later told police that he didn't remember much, just that he'd used a hammer, and that he now knew he was going back to prison. When officers cuffed him, he didn't resist. He sat quietly on the curb outside. He was acting as if none of this had really happened. They read him his rights, took him to the station, leaving behind them, inside that house, the silence of what he'd done that stretched from room to room. Here is the available footage. No description really does it justice. It's not that long, but it's definitely worth watching.
4 inches in with a bread knife.
Can we have a look?
Yeah, and 1 on the stomach. I bled quite.
Right, do you want to
I
take?
bled quite a lot.
Yeah.
Can we go down
No, just stay there, stay there.
I just don't want to be in front of her.
Alright, just go on the corner.
Just walking wounded at the minute.
Alright, stand here. Stay here.
Right,
So,
we told you, I know what's going to happen to you now, mate.
Well, I know it's going to happen
just
when we go to prison, obviously, but again.
Why, what have you done? Have you done something to anyone else?
Yeah.
What have you done?
I've murdered 4 people.
After doing what he did in that house, Damien then took an Xbox from the home and sold it for cash. He then took that money and used it to buy substances.
Officers and staff have been working around the clock on this case, and I can now confirm that in the early hours of this morning, 31-year-old Damien Bendel from Killermarsh was charged with 4 counts of murder. He will appear before magistrates in Derby this morning. My thoughts, and those of the whole constabulary, remain with the families of those involved. Specially trained officers continue to support the families at this incredibly sad and difficult time. The loss of Terry, John Paul, Lacey and Connie has deeply impacted the whole community of Killermarsh and beyond. I would like to thank residents for their support that they have given to the investigation team over the past few days, and to remind the people of Killermarsh that my officers and staff will continue to patrol the area, and you can approach them if you have any information you want to pass on. Thank you.
Following the arrest, when Damien appeared in court, he pleaded guilty to all charges, 4 counts of murder, 1 count of violations against Lacey. The families of the victims delivered their statements. Jason Bennett, father of John Paul and Lacey, said, "It's like my heart has been shattered into a billion pieces, never to be repaired." Connie's dad, Charles Gent, said, "I wake up every morning hoping this has all been a terrible nightmare, but it's not." Inquests into the event revealed a level of systemic failure that stunned everyone involved. Probation officials accepted 51 separate failings. The chief inspector of probation called it unacceptable at every stage. The senior coroner said the tragedy was contributed to by acts or omissions from the very agency meant to protect the public. The curfew order placing Damien in the home was dangerous and entirely inappropriate. No safeguarding checks had been completed. Warnings simply weren't shared. Those obscene electronic tag comments, where he said exactly what he was going to do, were somehow not reported. And yes, staff were overworked and they were under-supported. But regardless of the reasons, none of that will change the outcome for Terry, John Paul, Lacey and Connie. That house on Chandos Crescent has since been demolished. In its place, a patch of landscaped grass now grows. It's been turfed over in line with the family's wishes. There is a cherry tree planted nearby, with a small plaque in remembrance. But the memory of that weekend, the sleepover, the sweet stall, the pictures of smiling children, all of that does remain. But sadly, so does the pain. Damien Bendel received a whole life sentence. This is a rare sentence in the UK, which means he will never, ever be released.
She posted online a bit about how she thinks no one cares about her, so seeing all of this would probably just make her feel so cared about.
This is the true story of Riley Crossman, a happy, caring and talented teenager. A girl with an amazing future within her grasp. Someone that loved her family, her boyfriend, her life. But after going to bed alone one night, she vanished, almost without a trace. What would become of Riley? Riley Crossman was born on December 22nd, 2003 in Martinsburg, West Virginia. Her mother was Chantel and her father was named Lance. Her family described Riley as beautiful, an innocent soul with a laugh that would fill a room. She was a natural artist, a talented dancer, and it was said that she had the singing voice of an angel. Riley had a real love for babies and children, and they always seemed to love her too. She was a big sister to one little sister and two younger brothers. Being a big sister was perfect for Riley. Her family said that she was a real beacon of light to them and to the world. She was loving, helpful, caring and kind. When Riley hit her teenage years, her family described her as being intelligent and as dramatic as teenage girls come. I think they meant that in a loving way though. That is the reality of being a teenager. Her parents did split up and this gave Riley two new families, one in Martinsburg and one in Berkeley Springs. Mother Chantel paired up with boyfriend Andy McCauley and they lived together. Father Lance found love once more as well with Jessica Bishop. By 2019, Riley was now 15 years old and was beginning to transition into the adult world. Although she was still very much a fun-loving teenager. She began to date her schoolmate named Hayden. Although a teenage romance, Hayden did seem to genuinely cherish Riley. Riley's parents actually supported the relationship. They could see that Riley was happy with him and they believed she had found a good young man. As her parents were now separated, she did see both parents regularly, but she spent most time at her mum's. This meant that she went to school there and built a bit more of a life for herself in that home. Whilst she spent time with both of her parents, she mostly stayed at her mother's place and went to school there too. Other than the previously mentioned normal teenage drama, things were looking good and were only looking to get better. On the 7th of May 2019, Riley had been at school all day. She then returned home at around 3:30 p.m. As she came in through the door, she saw her mother sleeping on the couch. Mother Chantel was a hard-working woman. She normally worked 2 jobs to keep the family afloat and the house in order. However, on this day, Chantel was feeling under the weather. She left her first job early so that she could try to recover before starting her night job. After resting up as best as she could, she got herself together and once more went to work. Once Chantel had left the house, Riley spent a few hours with her grandmother. As time drew on, they separated ways and Riley went up to her bedroom. Mother Chantel got back from her second job at about 10 p.m. She saw that daughter Riley's door was shut. This wasn't particularly unusual. She could have been busy, or maybe she had just crashed out early that night. Chantel then decided to go to bed herself and try to recover from her illness. The house fell into silence. The next morning, now the 8th of May, Mother Chantel was once more getting ready for work. She noticed that Riley's bedroom door was still closed. This was kind of unusual, but not too disturbing. She decided to just go and check on her daughter. But Riley wasn't there. She checked the rest of the house. Still no Riley. Riley was known to sometimes leave the house early to go to school. Arriving early meant that she could spend some more time with her friends. And more importantly, it meant that she could see her boyfriend, Hayden. Hayden was actually due to go on a field trip that day. So to Chantel, it all kind of added up. Her daughter had gone to spend time with her boyfriend whilst she could. The entire school day passed without anything new coming to light. But then the time came when Riley should have arrived home. As 3:30 p.m. passed, Riley's grandmother noticed that she hadn't yet made it home. This was concerning enough for her to call Chantel. Mother Chantel was concerned and went about tracking Riley down herself. She tried contacting her daughter by text message, but they weren't going through. She tried to call her, but those calls went straight to voicemail. Concern was growing by the second. She contacted the school to see if Riley was still there or if they knew anything else. However, in a moment that must have made her blood run cold, she was informed that Riley never even made it to school that day. Chantel sprang into action and drove directly to the school. Her last port of call was her daughter's boyfriend, Hayden. She waited in the school parking lot for him to get back from the field trip. And when he arrived, Chantel hoped that he would be able to shed some light on where Riley was. But she was sorely disappointed. Hayden had gone the entire day without seeing or even hearing from his beloved girlfriend. Far from finding out where Riley was, Chantel now almost knew even less than she did before. There was no other place to turn other than to the police. She called the police and reported Riley as officially missing. The police force, Riley's family and volunteers from the community all sprang into action. No stone was left unturned in the local area. Time was of the essence to bring Riley home. The school and surrounding areas were intensely searched. The search team combed the neighbourhoods and parks tirelessly, but Riley just seemed to have vanished. There were theories that perhaps she had run away from home. However, we are talking about a 15-year-old here. Riley couldn't drive, she didn't have the finances, and it didn't seem like she had the motive to do so either. She was, to all intents and purposes, happy. Things were going well, and it didn't seem realistic that she would leave her mother, father, grandmother, siblings, friends, or Hayden. Perhaps something more sinister was at play. Police looked at the last time that Riley was confirmed to be okay. Riley's grandmother saw and spoke with her on the night of the 7th, and after that, there was only contact made via her cell phone. Riley spoke to her friends and Hayden until around midnight. So we can deduce that when Mother Chantel got home at 10:30 p.m. that night, Riley was in her room and on her phone. But then after that, there was one more sign from Riley. Strangely, Strangely, at 5:30 a.m., Riley called Hayden. However, understandably, Hayden was asleep and the call went unanswered. Since that call, nobody had heard from or seen Riley Crossman. Police descended on the Crossman home, hoping to shed more light on what could have happened.
You mind if we take a look in her bedroom? This is her straight back?
Yes, sir. Only mirror we have like this, so I came in yesterday morning, and I don't remember that being there. I feel like I would have noticed her boat bag still being here, and especially her glasses, because this is not exactly the way it was. I've been in here digging and looking to see if there was a note.
The last time you saw her?
Like 9, maybe 10ish.
At night?
Yeah.
And what context was that?
Oh, she was here in the house. She went to bed probably, well, I don't know what time she went to bed, but all the kids were in the room by like 9:30.
Did she leave in the morning?
No, I got up 4 o'clock in the morning, left 5.
Okay.
Go to work.
Police searched the home, much of which was pretty unremarkable. There were no obvious signs that this was a crime scene. Upon entering her room, however, something was obviously not right, furthering the theory that Riley had not run away on her own accord. On her bedside sat her wallet and her glasses. Why would she run away without these essentials? It just didn't make sense. But much darker was reddy brown stains on Riley's bedsheets and pillows. The pillow was tested and it revealed it contained saliva mixed with blood. DNA testing revealed that it belonged to Riley. Police now strongly believed that Riley had been abducted, and everyone hoped that she was still alive. The search for Riley went on, and the search for her abductor began. On May the 16th, 2019, 9 days after Riley was last seen, an update finally came their way. Police received calls of a disturbing scene unfolding near Tuscarora Pike in Berkeley County. A body inside a trash bag was found in a state of decomposition. The clothing pointed towards it being Riley, and Mother Chantel confirmed the clothes were indeed her daughter's. After an autopsy, the worst was confirmed. This was Riley Crossman. However, due to the state that the body was discovered in, police were unable to determine how Riley had met her end, nor could they determine if she had been violated. The fact that Riley was found in a trash bag was just one marker of the crime. She was covered with drywall joiner or some similar white chalky substance. She was wearing just one untied shoe. The other was not at the scene. She wore shorts that were unzipped and unbuttoned. There was the notable absence of a bra, and her underwear was ripped. Everything here pointed towards murder. The hunt for Riley's killer was on. Devastation ripped through the family and the community. Everyone was on edge. Who did this, and would they do it again? Police spoke once more with Riley's parents and other family members. Even if they weren't guilty themselves, they may have had some much needed information. Everyone they interviewed had watertight alibis, with one exception. In their investigation, police spoke to one neighbour that had some interesting new information. A green truck was seen on the driveway of the Crossman house on the very day that Riley vanished. This truck wasn't known to the neighbour. She knew that Mother Chantel was at her night job, and Chantel's boyfriend Andy didn't drive. So the driver of the truck was a mystery. If they knew who drove it, they may have the killer. Back on that day that Riley went missing, Chantel had noticed something a little strange. When she told her boyfriend Andy that Riley seemed to have gone missing, she said he acted strangely. He didn't seem overly concerned. He instead seemed jittery, nervous. He went into a kind of panic mode, but not a helpful one. She saw him quickly entering the house and grabbing some items. He then left, claiming he was going to look for Riley, just as Chantel was. And later that night, when Chantel finally made it home after searching for her daughter, she saw Andy pretending to be asleep on the couch. Had he even looked at all? Something felt off. The police spoke with Andy once more. He had some new questions to answer. Andy was taken in for questioning and was asked about where he was on May the 8th. Andy told them that he was at his job, just as he should be. But his workmates told a different story. They said that he left for 4 to 5 hours in the day, highly suspicious. Andy then took this as a chance to change his story.
When was the last time you saw her? 9:30. 9:30 night Tuesday. Did you see Riley go upstairs at 9:30?
Yeah, she went upstairs at 9:30. We're here to talk about Riley. I don't know what they've told you, but I'll reiterate that. I don't care about your drug source. Yes. I don't care about what kind of drugs you're using. Okay, we care about Riley. Yeah. Okay, that's what I'm here. Where'd you get him from? I can't tell you how I got him from. Do you want to cooperate with us and find Riley? Yes. Where'd you get the drugs from? You understand what I'm telling you? I don't care about the drugs. I do not care about the drugs. He does not care about the drugs.
I'm not trying to
charge honesty.
Charge.
Okay, we need honesty. Who did you buy the drugs from? What's more important, a drug dealer or Riley? Who did you get the drugs from?
Okay, is that how it went down that day? Is that how that happened? Wednesday afternoon?
Okay. This is one of these times you need to really sit down and think about what you're going to say. So you want to rethink what you just told me. One thing I'm going to not do to you is lie to you. I promise you that. I will never lie to you. I'm not going to make up. Okay? Don't do that to me.
I'm not trying to.
Okay. You're not trying to. Let's try this again. Let's go back. I know it's been a couple days. I know a lot has happened. Okay, I get that. I understand that.
He now said that yes, he had left his job, and he did so to go and buy illicit substances from a dealer. And one workmate said that his excuse for leaving was actually to go and meet a girl. His story was in tatters and couldn't stand up to the most gentle probing.
Is there a reason in your mind that you would think that she would tell her boyfriend that she's afraid of you? No. Something going on that night, and did y'all get into any sort of argument?
Nothing. She FaceTimes her boyfriend all the time. You realize that, right?
Good.
What if I told you her last text to her boyfriend? We're saying don't talk because she still has the FaceTime one. Andy's in here. I'm afraid.
That's what it said.
What if I told you that?
Honestly, that's crazy.
100%.
Honestly, that's crazy.
She lives in the same house you're in.
Yes.
Okay. Besides her boyfriend and mom, and her brothers, you probably have the most access to it, right?
I guess, if that's what you want to say.
Well, I mean, it's true, right?
Yeah, okay, yeah.
The floodgates now opened and a wave of evidence came to light. The green truck that the neighbours saw pull up to the house was identified. It belonged to Andy's workmate. The truck was subsequently searched and revealed some damning finds. The chalky white filler substance that was found on Riley's body was also found in the truck, along with some sheet metal screws. 2 of this exact type of screw were also found at the scene that Riley was discovered at. Specialist cadaver dogs also matched the scent from the scene to the truck. CCTV from around the time that Riley went missing also didn't help Andy's case at all. Andy was seen driving the green truck to locations near the crime scene. There was no evidence of him meeting the dealer, as he said. When the locations revealed on the CCTV were cross-referenced with Andy's cell phone location, this just opened up another can of worms. His phone records revealed that he had been contacting workmates to try and secure somewhere to stay. Weirdly, one colleague that he tried it on with didn't even really get along with him, so this presented as odd and desperate. Andy just seemed to desperately want to distance himself from the Crossman household. The picture being painted was extremely dark. In September 2021, over 2 years since Riley's passing, the case went to trial. Andy was on the hook for first-degree murder, concealment of a body, and crimes against a minor. The prosecution got to work. Along with 239 pieces of evidence and 25 people willing to testify against Andy, this is what they believe happened. On Riley's final night, she was messaging boyfriend Hayden. Hayden recounted how Riley was saying that Andy was in the house. He seemed to be high on illicit substances, and he was going in and out of Riley's room. She said that she was scared of him. The prosecution claimed due to his illicit substance usage, his judgment was impaired. He then attempted to violate Riley, smothering her with a pillow as he did so, until she was no longer breathing. After some weak defense and a plea for a 15-year sentence, Andy was found guilty on all charges and was handed down 2 life sentences, with no chance of parole. The phone rang just after 4:30 in the morning. On the other end was Christopher Boone. He was calling from his mother's house. His voice was flat, almost casual, but in contrast to that, he shared a horrifying secret with the call handler. When police arrived at the home on Dexter Way in Gloucester just 10 minutes later, they were met with a silent, surreal horror. The kitchen floor held a sight that would leave attending officers requiring therapy. And though the rest of the house appeared quiet, Christopher's youngest daughters, just 6 and 2, were still upstairs. They were alone, awake, and very much aware of what had just happened feet away. When Christopher Boone showed up in Laura Mortimer's life, his history wasn't just checkered, it was already marked with extreme violence. 8 years prior, in early 2010, he was convicted of attacking a previous partner, along with the partner's mother. That attack happened in front of 2 young children. He was given a suspended prison sentence for assault, for battery, and criminal damage. So he served no actual jail time, this was just a warning on paper, possibly the first of many arguable decisions by the system. Christopher met Laura Mortimer in 2010, a woman that had a daughter from a previous relationship named Ella Dalby. There's no indication that Laura had any idea about Christopher's previous conviction when she met him later on in that same year. And crucially, no one told her. This case was before the wider rollout of Clare's Law in the UK, a legal tool that allows someone to request disclosure of a partner's criminal history. It meant that Laura had no formal way of accessing his record unless she or a loved one specifically asked police for access to that information. At that point, at the start, Christopher was far from a monster to Laura. He was charming, helpful, and exactly what Laura, an ambitious young mother and wedding planner, wanted to believe in. But by this stage, he'd already had a lot of practice at hiding the truth, and the criminal justice system didn't seem to be holding him to account. Within just weeks of meeting Laura, Christopher had moved into her home, and within just a few months, she was pregnant. To the outside world, things looked like they were moving fast, but like the couple were happy. Laura was building her own bridal business, a business which she cutely named Sweet Beginnings. She was lively, determined, and known for making other people's dreams come true. Behind closed doors though, the cracks were already forming in the relationship. But regardless of this, the two would still get married. It turns out that Christopher was controlling with money. Every bit of Laura's income went into his bank account. Over time, the woman began withdrawing. Her family noticed the weight loss. They saw that she was exhausted, and they felt the quiet tension that hovered over her every move. But whenever they asked her what was going on, she would just brush it off. She could handle him, she said. And even if she couldn't, it's not like he'd been physical with her, at least not yet. It was Boxing Day, the 24th of December 2014, when Laura ran out of her home wearing only her underwear. She was hysterical, she was injured, and she was absolutely terrified. She banged on her neighbour's door and told them that Christopher Boone had attacked her. When police arrived, they were there within just 6 minutes. Photos were taken of Laura's injuries, and officers spoke to neighbours, the people who had witnessed her distress firsthand. And crucially, they heard something from daughter Ella, who was just 8 years old at the time. Ella had seen and heard what happened to her mum. She made comments at the scene that corroborated Laura's version of events. But despite that, no formal effort was made to secure her statement. The officers did arrest Christopher that night, and he was taken into custody and then interviewed by a domestic abuse specialist. At that time, he denied hurting Laura, and not long after, Laura began walking her story back. She now told officers that she didn't want to press charges. She didn't want to go through a trial, and she didn't want to escalate the situation. She said that she'd be okay, and so she went back home with him. What police didn't do was follow up with daughter Ella. They had a credible witness that was in the house, and they let her voice go officially unheard. This moment, according to the Serious Case Review published years later, was the one and only known physical incident by Christopher against Laura or Ella before what happened. And it was a moment that, against all odds, was still somehow missed. So, despite the mounting evidence, no charges were ever filed against Christopher. Gloucestershire police later said that while their officers acted swiftly, the decision not to prosecute was in line with policy at the time, and without Laura's cooperation, it was deemed that there wasn't enough to proceed. However, the review would later find otherwise. There was plenty there to build a victimless prosecution. There was Laura's initial statement. There was her visible injuries. There were the statements of their neighbours who helped her. Of course, there were Ella's words. And there was proof of Christopher Boone's past. What it seems was missing, though, was the will to link it all together. Frustratingly, no effort was made to involve outside agencies. No specialist consultation to pursue charges without Laura's support. There was no safeguarding team that followed up on Ella's experiences. So Christopher was set free with no charges, and Laura's bruises would heal. However, the pattern had already been set, and he learned something important that night, that there were no real consequences, not for him at least. By 2015, Christopher's dark behaviour had moved underground. There were no more obvious injuries. There were no late-night police calls. But his control on Laura was tightening. He completely controlled her money. Her business that she'd been working so hard on, that money just went straight to him, and Laura never seemed to have any money of her own. Christopher managed her time too. Family later learned that she only had one front door key, and Christopher had the back door key. He kept control of the keys to the house, which is made even worse when I remind you that this was actually Laura's home. She had to be home when he returned, or he couldn't get in. He isolated her, slowly and deliberately. Her visits with family became less frequent. Calls went unanswered, and when she did show up, the brightness had faded from her eyes. Friends and loved ones did try to check in, but Laura downplayed everything. Only one time, when Christopher was seen with another woman, did Laura react with visible anger. Christopher responded to this, though, by threatening the friend who'd seen him and told Laura. He warned them and their family to watch their backs. At home, Laura was now walking on eggshells, and Ella, although young, she was watching everything and knew exactly what was happening. She loved her mother, and she wanted to protect her from this invader in their home. Between 2010 and 2018, Ella's behaviour at school was flagged multiple times. She was struggling to focus. She was now acting out, and she was defiant with teachers. Eventually, she was diagnosed with ADHD, but no one asked why a happy, expressive child had now started withdrawing. Very possibly a misdiagnosis. No one asked her what her home life was really like. Perhaps after the first incident, she realised that no one in authority would even listen. And to make things even worse, every time there was a meeting at school, Christopher Boone made sure he was there. Ella's biological father, Tom Dalby, was left out. He was never called in. He was no longer included in the decision-making. And in one case, Christopher even claimed that Ella was a liar. He'd say anything to protect himself. During this time too, Laura and Christopher would bring 2 more daughters into their world. Exactly what home was like for the girls, I honestly dread to think. It's just awful to even begin to consider. Laura now started visiting her GP often. She came in for stomach pains, backaches, and fatigue. She sometimes also had notable weight loss. On another visit, she had injuries to her legs. But each time she visited the doctors, the physical symptoms were treated. But the context, the pattern of these issues, both were seemingly ignored. No professional connected the dots, and none of them ever asked Laura the question that may have saved her life. Is someone hurting you at home? By May 2018, Laura had made her decision. She was done. She told her friends that Christopher had gone for her again, and this time she wasn't backing down. She wanted a divorce, and she gave him a deadline. He now had 2 weeks to move out of her house. 10 days before the final event, Christopher Boone punched a wall in a fit of rage. His hand was injured badly enough that it had to be set in a cast. But the most chilling of all wasn't the act of striking the wall, it was what he said when he did it that was meant for your face. Laura was now actively trying to move forwards. On May the 27th, she went out to the pub with friends. She laughed, she danced, she told them she was ready for a fresh start. Her business was thriving, her girls were now all growing up, and to make things perfect, she just needed him gone. When she got home that night, she FaceTimed her aunt at 1:18 a.m, and that would be the last time that anyone outside of that house would see her alive. There is a framework developed by criminologist Professor Jane Monckton Smith. She studied hundreds of domestic homicide cases and found that they often follow a chilling, predictable pattern. These are 8 stages that build over time. Stage 1 is the pre-relationship history of control or abuse. Christopher Boone had that. There was the prior conviction in 2010 for what he did to his previous partner and her mother. Stage 2 is moving in quickly. He moved into Laura's home within just a few weeks. Stage 3 is escalation of control. This is through isolation, financial restriction, or intimidation. Remember, he took her income. He managed her door keys. He tried to cut her off from friends and family. Then stage 4, a trigger event. Laura discovered that he'd been out with another woman. He wasn't happy. Stage 5, a change in thinking. Christopher began to feel that he was losing control and that the tables were now turned against him. Stage 6 is planning. He punched the wall and threatened her, refusing to leave. And then there's stages 7 and 8. Stage 7 is the act itself. Sometime in the early hours of May the 28th, Christopher attacked. Laura bravely fought back against her husband. She had defensive marks across her arms and hands. She was jabbed at 18 times, 13 of those to her face and neck. Brave daughter Ella, hearing the chaos from upstairs, got out of bed. She was 11 years old. She ran towards the danger. She tried desperately to help her mother. And so, Christopher Boone turned on her, too. She was jabbed at with a sharp implement a disgusting 24 times. Some strikes were so forceful that they splintered bones. Her mother's red DNA on her feet showed that she had entered the room whilst Laura was already in severe trouble. But even that didn't stop her from trying to help. Ella and her mum were found lying side by side on the kitchen floor. The 2 youngest girls were still inside the house, alone with the bodies. They were, however, thankfully, alive and not physically harmed. But for them, nothing would ever be the same again. Stage 8 is the aftermath of the attack. Christopher fled the house and called his mother. He told her what he'd done, and together they called the police. And then he simply waited. Police arrived just 10 minutes later. Christopher Boone was obviously arrested, and here is an excerpt from his police interview. As you can see, his cast is still on his arm from his previous threats towards Laura.
Grounds and reasons for your arrest. You were arrested yesterday, the 28th of May, 2018, at 6 o'clock in the morning on Sandhurst Lane in Gloucester. You were arrested on suspicion of the murder of your wife, Laura Boone, and your 11-year-old stepdaughter, Ella Dalby. both of who were discovered deceased at your home address of 4 Dexter Way in Gloucester in the early hours of the morning.
In the aftermath, Laura and Ella's family didn't just disappear into silence. Instead, they bravely stepped into the chaos. They started demanding change. Laura's mother, Hilary Stinchcombe, and Ella's paternal grandmother, Kim Clements, became relentless advocates for justice. Together with Laura's sister, Jo Piontek, they took on the institutions that they believed had failed them. When the Domestic Homicide Review first came out, the family was horrified. Early drafts described Laura as, and I quote, a rubbish mum, and implied that she drank too much. This was not only inaccurate, it was heartless and insulting. Laura wasn't weak. She wasn't a bad mother. She was surviving. She was running a business. She was protecting her children, and she was trying to escape. The family fought for the report to actually reflect the truth, and amazingly, they won. With the help of advocate Sue Hale from Advocacy After Fatal Domestic Abuse, they reshaped the review into something actually meaningful. It now stands as a case study in systemic failure, and also as a call to action. But their work didn't stop there. They've pushed for mandatory training on coercive control. They've called for better listening to children's voices, and they fought for a centralised system to track repeat offenders, so patterns like Christopher Boone's can't be buried by disconnected files. As Sister Jo put it, if we save the next child or the mother's life, it is worth everything. In November 2018, Christopher Boone stood in Bristol Crown Court. He had initially pleaded not guilty, but that changed, quietly and coldly, just before the trial. He now admitted to both murders. The judge didn't hold back. She described the attack as wanton savagery. Laura had fought for her life, she said, and Ella had bravely come to the aid of her mother and must have witnessed the attack before Boone turned the knife on her. The court heard about Christopher's past convictions, about the 2014 assault, about the countless signs that were missed. Laura's mother Hilary spoke through tears. She called her daughter a wonderful, devoted mother. She called Ella her beautiful, adored first grandchild. Ella's father Tom said, "Every day I feel the terror and pain that Ella must have felt in those last moments of her life." More than 1,000 mourners filled Gloucester Cathedral for their funeral. Christopher Boone was sentenced to life in prison, and he will serve a minimum of 29 years. But even with this in mind, there is no punishment in the world that could bring Laura or Ella back.
He was upset by the whole situation because he was talking to me again and he was crying and he was scared. He was genuinely was scared for like I said, I can't even imagine how it must feel to have an allegation like that against you. Mm-hmm. And then even though she then said, oh no, it's not true, but then to disappear doesn't exactly look good.
At 11:23 a.m. on a warm July morning, a teenager named Bernadette Walker got into a car with a man she called Dad, but she wouldn't be seen again. For the next 91 minutes, that man's phone would go completely dark. No calls, no text messages, no GPS tracking, nothing. When his signal came back, the very first thing he did was call Bernadette's mother. That call lasted 9 minutes, and whatever was said during that time, it sparked a cover-up that would unravel into one of the most disturbing cases in modern British history. But this case isn't just about what happened in those 91 minutes. This is about what happened in the months and years beforehand. Because Bernadette had told someone what was happening to her. She had written it down. She had begged to be believed. However, she was not. And by the time people started listening, Bernadette was already gone. Bernadette Walker was 17. She was studying photography at Peterborough College, UK. She loved art and being creative. She wore thick-rimmed glasses. She would dye her hair a multitude of bright colours, and she enjoyed posting quirky videos online. To her friends in the outside world, she was known as B, but inside her home, she was someone else entirely. Bernadette was a child trying to survive a terrible secret. Scott Walker wasn't her biological father, but he had raised her, and she did call him Dad. He lived with her mother, Sarah Walker, and brother Anthony. And even after the romantic relationship between Scott and Sarah ended, they kept on sharing the same family home. To outsiders, it might have looked like a complicated but stable setup, but inside it was anything but. Scott had a history of violence. Bernadette's older brother Anthony would later say, "We kept going to the police. He used to only go for the younger ones because they couldn't open up about it properly." Anthony recalled being punched in the stomach, and he also said that he saw Scott slash his mother's arm using a sharp implement from the kitchen, and he did this in front of him. Another time he said he walked in on Scott pressing a pillow over a baby's face. I mean, what the fuck? Mother Sarah later told police that Scott had threatened her with violence many times before, that he'd said that he'd kill her new partner and even slit the dog's throat. Still, no safeguarding action was ever taken. So with Sarah, the mother of the house, knowing how dark things were getting, somehow they still continued down that path. And in that haunting environment, Bernadette was hiding something even worse than that. I just want to double down on exactly what it was like in that family home, just to look a little further into the dynamics, and also at how that family came to be what it was. Sarah Walker was a mother of 6. There were 4 children from a previous relationship, and then 2 more that she would later have with Scott Walker. As we know, Scott wasn't Bernadette's biological father. She was known as Bernadette Padley for the first few years of her life. Scott met Sarah while still in a relationship with another woman. She was called Jill and was the mother of his sons. According to Jill, their relationship didn't actually end. It was just replaced. So Sarah started out as the other woman. Jill told police that Scott's relationship with Sarah began as an affair, and then not long after he actually left Jill, Sarah fell pregnant. And then came another child. Eventually, all 8 of them, Scott, Sarah and the 6 children, including Anthony and Bernadette, were all living under one roof. And this relationship that started with betrayal didn't get any better. Scott was controlling from the very beginning. Ex-partner Jill said that Scott could be charming in public, but cruel in private. And it didn't take long for that cruelty to surface inside Sarah's home. Sarah's relationship with Scott wasn't stable either. They would break up, get back together, and then split again. And even when Sarah started dating someone new, Scott still stayed in that house. He just refused to leave. Anthony said the family was desperate to get him out. However, Scott had locked himself into every aspect of their lives. 6 kids lived in that house, and not one of them was safe. It wasn't just dysfunctional, it was seriously dangerous. And honestly, it seems like the events in this video were just a matter of time. Scott had installed a camera in the family bathroom. He told authorities that he did it to catch her hiding sweet wrappers in the toilet roll. That's what he said, but Bernadette, now a teenager, knew what was happening, and she knew that this wasn't okay. But she also knew what would happen if she told the truth, because she'd already tried to do it once before, and her own mother did much worse than just not helping her. As a side note, researching this case made me feel claustrophobic and just so awful for Bernadette. I've covered over 300 cases now, but sometimes situations just hit me. And I think it's because this case is just so slow motion. It's just so drawn out and just so awful. I really feel for Bernadette. On the evening of July the 16th, just 2 days before she would disappear, Bernadette finally found the courage to speak out. She went to the one person a child is supposed to be able to trust. She told her mother about what was happening and made note of the interaction in her diary. It read, "He's been doing stuff to me. There was a camera in the bathroom or something. He's been videoing me and touching me, and it gets worse." So Bernadette outright told her mother that Scott Walker had in fact been doing terrible things to her over a number of years, that his behaviour had been getting worse and worse, more violating, more terrifying. Mother Sarah didn't believe her though. In fact, she called her a liar, and then she made things even worse for her daughter. Told my mum about my dad and the abuse. She called me a liar and threatened to kill me if I told the police. She said that the other kids matter more. I love feeling unwanted. I feel nothing right now because I always thought that Mum would deal with it and it would all go away. But no, he's still here telling me I made it up. What kind of parent wouldn't believe their daughter? But it's fine. I'm going to pretend it's okay till I leave home. Then I will block them out of my life. I'd rather say I'm an orphan than say I have abusive parents who couldn't give a shit about me or what happens to me. If I was brave enough, I probably would have already left or just killed myself, Bernadette wrote. I find it so hard to think about how close Bernadette was to escaping. She was so close. Maybe 6 months or a year, and she would have been out of college and turned 18. But that's just fantasy at this stage. That diary is the most devastating piece of evidence in this case. It was a catalogue of heartbreaking words. And although those words were being shared privately, Bernadette had still been hoping desperately for someone to come and help her. Sarah later told the police that the allegations didn't make sense, that things didn't add up. She insisted that Bernadette was probably lying to try and get Scott out of the house so that her new boyfriend could move in. But it was clear from Bernadette's writing that she wasn't lying. This was a heartbroken teenager, someone who was scared. And of course, remember, this was written in a private diary, so why would she write anything other than the truth? It's hard to explain your way out of that one. I found this video that Sarah posted of her and Bernadette just months before the events of this video. It really grinds my gears when people do stuff like this. She was sharing videos on social media that made it look like she was a good mum, like she was friends with her daughter, but in reality, we know she was just a trash mother.
It's a video. I'm actually going to bath when I get off this. I'm not.
Whilst I was editing this video, I became aware that Scott and Sarah made TikToks, and I've tried to track them down, but all I can find are these two screenshots. So it seems that they both projected a very different image, in contrast to reality. Gross, but back to the timeline. That night after the confession, after the cry for help, Sarah sent Bernadette to stay at Scott's parents' home. This was to be a cooling off period, as she called it, but in reality, Bernadette had just told her mother that Scott had abused her over a number of years. She had been dismissed, threatened, and then sent away. She arrived at the house tired, scared, and crying. Julie Walker, Scott's mother, was the one who opened the door that night, and she remembered Bernadette trembling. She was very upset, Julie later told the court. She was crying. She said that she wanted her mum to believe her. She kept repeating, "I'm not lying." But even here, in what was essentially her grandparents' house, Bernadette didn't feel that she could fully speak out. She told Julie that she couldn't go into details of what happened because she was her grandparent. Julie tried to ask her what the allegations were, but Bernadette said that she couldn't speak about them. So the teenager sat on the couch, holding back more tears. She didn't really eat. She didn't send text messages to her friends, and she didn't seem like herself anymore. She just said that it was bad, that she wasn't making it up, and then she curled up on the sofa and fell asleep. And the next morning, now July the 18th, 2020, she was described as visibly shaken. When Scott called to say he was going to come and collect her, Bernadette barely reacted at all. Julie watched her granddaughter grow more quiet and withdrawn. Before midday, Scott would turn up to the house to pick up Bernadette. Bernadette was still quiet, and her resignation said everything. And when Scott arrived, Bernadette followed him silently out of the door. She was now a version of herself that nobody had seen before. Julie would later say that the atmosphere changed the second that Scott walked in. She said the air seemed heavier, that Bernadette didn't speak, that she didn't try to delay leaving, that she just left quietly. and this would be the last time that anyone other than Scott would ever see her again. It's easy to look back at a tragedy and to point fingers at what should have been done, but in Bernadette's case, there were so many warning signs before she disappeared, and these were repeated. Almost every single one of these signs was missed or dismissed. Her older brother Anthony had tried for years to raise the alarm. He would later tell the court that Scott Walker had in fact attacked multiple family members. He said that he'd been a violent man. He said that the family had kept going to the police, but that nothing was done. In fact, Scott had a criminal history. He'd been convicted of harassment in 2002. He was cautioned in 2008 for violating a non-molestation order. He was even arrested in 2012 for allegedly assaulting a boy. This prompted a social services investigation. In spite of all of this, Cambridgeshire Constabulary later said none of these records raised safeguarding concerns. Peterborough City Council admitted that there had been involvement with the family between 2010 and 2013, but that they wouldn't comment any further. Brother Anthony backed up the sentiment found in Bernadette's diary. He described it as a household of fear, and let's not forget how he reportedly placed a pillow over a baby's face twice, and still, somehow, no real protection was put in place for anyone. When Bernadette made her disclosure to her mother on July the 16th, she was failed once again in the worst way. Her mother's reaction was just absolutely vile, and when she went missing on July the 18th, it took 3 full days before anyone even reported it. Sarah just waited and waited. She didn't call the police until the 21st of July, and when she finally did, she played down the situation. She mentioned that Bernadette had made allegations against Scott, but said her daughter had later admitted that she was telling lies. This is that initial phone call.
Cambridgeshire Police, how can we help?
Hiya, it's Mrs. Walker. I'm just ringing to report my 17-year-old daughter missing.
Okay, I'll get a report for you there. How long has she been missing?
Well, she ran away on Saturday lunchtime, but I knew where she was until she started messaging like 1 a.m. Yesterday morning.
Right. So she stopped messaging 1 a.m. yesterday morning.
Yeah, and I gave her the day to sort of stew it out a bit because it's not the first time she's done it.
Mm-hmm.
And then of course I've become aware of the fact that she's not where she told us she was. So obviously that's why I'm phoning now.
No, that's fine. What we can do then for you is we can get that raised. Bear with me a second and we'll start raising the missing from home report. So you last saw your daughter physically on the 16th, is that right?
Yeah, I saw her on the 16th. No, the 17th. I saw her on the 17th before she went to her grandparents. And then her dad picked her up on the 18th when she sort of jumped out the car and ran off.
Okay, so when's the last time either you or Dad see Bernadette?
It was around, I'd say, 1 p.m. on the Saturday the 18th.
Okay, and where was Bernadette at that point in time?
Where was it she jumped out the car and ran off? I'm just asking my dad now. It was between Salters Way and Mount Stephen Avenue. It was around that area.
Okay, where did she say she was going?
She didn't. She just it was just talking to her about, because there'd been a row and that's why she'd gone to the grandparents. And he just said, look, we'll go home. We can talk about things at home. And she went, I'm not going home. I've told you. And she just got out and ran, and he pulled over to roll a cigarette.
Fine, but then you knew where she was, or you thought you knew where she was, is that right?
Yes, yeah.
Where did you think she has been for the last couple of days?
Well, she messaged me and said, I'm at Luke's, which is her ex-boyfriend. I'm just looking, I'm going to Luke's. That's what she said, at 1:27.
Did you go to Luke's and see whether she was there, or did you make contact with Luke or his parents?
I didn't know because his parents are Polish and she doesn't speak a word of English, but she's been to Luke's before and we've confirmed that she's there. Like
you
we've
took your
been out.
daughter's word for that she was there. Is that right?
I did, yeah. Because yeah,
and
I
what
did.
made
Yeah.
you believe now that she's not there?
Because one of my sons was messaging Luke and said, right, my sister, can you tell my sister to phone my mum? Because we were just communicating through text messages, and he went, can you tell my sister to phone my mum? And he went, well, tell her yourself. And he went, well, that's what I'm doing, I'm telling you to tell her. Well, why, what, and he said something along the lines, what's it got to do with me? And he said, because my sister's there. And that's when Luke turned around and said, well, no, she's not actually, so what's going on?
Okay, so where did she leave Luke's, or hasn't she been at Luke's at all?
Well, I don't know whether he's just saying maybe she's there. This is why I thought it was best to phone the police.
So have you been to Luke's house to see whether she's there?
No, because I took her word that she was there, because last time she went there...
Okay, but when you found out she wasn't there, have you attended Luke's house to see what he knows?
No, I've spoken to him on Instagram through message, and he's assured me she's not there. And I spoke to her friend Chloe, because I thought, well, that's the next part of call, and she's not there. So that, like I said, that's why I've decided to come to you guys rather than go knocking on people's doors. So that's the problem with the worrying thing I've got with my daughter. If I knock on someone's door and she runs from there, where she was safe, then I don't know where she's going to be after that.
And where did you find she's not at Luke's?
I'm just going to go on Instagram now and find out when I message Luke. That was at 8:54 p.m. last night, and we thought she was at Chloe's by the time.
Discovered she was not at Luke's at 8:45 hours on the 20th.
No, that was PM. 8:54 p.m.
8:54 p.m. on the 20th.
Yeah.
On the 20th of the 7th. And then when did you contact Chloe?
Well, at that point, I followed Chloe on Instagram, so the only access, that was the only contact I could get her through. And she didn't accept my request till this morning.
And what did Chloe say this morning?
Well, at 8:28 a.m. I messaged and said Bernadette's mum and asked about, and then she said, I'm sorry, but I haven't heard a thing from her. I messaged her 3 days ago and she hasn't replied. And then she said they'd messaged in the group chat, the college, because the college group have a chat. The college students have a group chat, sorry, that's what I mean.
Okay, so let's just mention this because I want to get this across. The informant stated that her daughter Bernadette was there with her grandparents after an argument. Dad went to collect her on the 18th of the 7th, and as he pulled up in the car, she jumped out near Salters Way and Mount Stevens Avenue. Is that right?
Yeah.
Bernadette contacted mum to say she was going to stay at Luke's ex-boyfriend. Informant discovered that she's not at Luke's at 20:58 on the 20th, and then she contacted another friend, Chloe, who stated that she's not heard from Bernadette for 3 days. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, let me just get that across the control room.
In hindsight, I wish I'd phoned you guys a bit sooner, but I didn't want to push her away by, I don't know, stupid idea.
On the final day that Bernadette was seen alive, Scott Walker's phone lost signal at 11:23 a.m. At that time, he was supposedly driving Bernadette home. That was the last confirmed moment that anyone saw her. What happened next is still not officially known, but what we do know is this. For exactly 91 minutes, that's an hour and a half, Scott's phone remained switched off. There were no calls, no location data, nothing. Then at 12:54 p.m, it came back online. The very first thing that Scott did was to call Sarah Walker. That phone call lasted 9 minutes. Prosecutors believe that that was the moment that he told her what he'd done, when he broke the news to the mother that Bernadette was no longer alive. And now they formulated a plan. Sarah's actions after this moment would later support that theory. In private, however, Sarah was acting very differently. Within hours, she was using Bernadette's phone to send fake messages. She logged in and out of Bernadette's Facebook account, doing this over and over again, checking for any activity. She messaged Bernadette's friends to say that she had run away. She sent text messages from the phone, pretending to be her daughter, saying, "Just need some time, I'll be back soon." There were messages saying that she was sorry for lying about the abuse, claiming that she now just needed time to herself. And then on the night of July the 22nd, Sarah Googled the words, "I think my partner knows where my missing child is." She would later claim that she was brainwashed, that she was scared of Scott, that she felt trapped in the lies that she'd helped him to create. But by this time, Bernadette was already gone, and every day that passed made the truth so much harder to uncover. Scott's official explanation was that Bernadette had simply run away from him. However, the location that Scott claimed she had run away from him at was vague at best. He said that he stopped the car to roll a cigarette and that Bernadette jumped out, that she then ran off and simply disappeared. However, police couldn't find any witnesses who saw a girl running. There was no CCTV to back up what he said. In fact, there was no trail whatsoever and no proof that Bernadette ever exited that car alive. When officers pushed Scott about the location, about that spot where Bernadette supposedly vanished, he drew a map, but said that he couldn't remember the exact place. He told the police that he had a lot on his mind, and he couldn't even say if she had her phone or her bag, so the runaway story was losing steam pretty quickly. Around 3 weeks after Bernadette went missing, Mother Sarah was still holding down the fort, trying her best to bat away any questions from the police. She was relaying the well-rehearsed answers that she and Scott had concocted. Here is a section from one of her police interviews, and I ask you, does this seem like the behaviour of a woman whose teenage daughter had just vanished without a trace?
So it was about 1:30, 1:45 sort of time, because I know it had been a good half an hour of his phone going to voicemail before he finally phoned me back. And he said, she got out of the car and ran off. Because I said, well, why's your phone off? He went, it's dead. And he says, I left it, it dropped into the footwell of the car when they got out. And I went, what do you mean got out? He went, she ran off. He said, I pulled over for a cig. He says to roll the cigarette because his window's broke on that side and he doesn't smoke in the car anyway. He said, I pulled over to have a cigarette and she got out and she just ran off.
Anything about her or her?
Well, no, because at the time I said, well, what have you said to her? That was the first thing I said, what have you said? And he went, oh, nothing. And then when he's got back, he sort of rerun through what he told me on the phone. And I was like, all right, okay, well, let's give her a couple of hours to see if she messages. And of course she did. So that sort of set my mind at ease straight away.
What time did she message?
Must have been about was it 4 o'clock-ish or something? Yeah, it must have been about 4 o'clock. Because she'd already messaged me to say, can you forgive me or something like that. Oh my God, he's grumpy.
Yeah, mine is dead.
I'm stupid. I actually went to delete something off my phone. I was half asleep yesterday. I think it was yesterday. And I went like that and I deleted my whole freaking message thread. And it's really...
Deleted your message thread between you and
B. And I actually got it because there's on there, she tells me she loves me and things like that.
So she left her backpack, let's go back. So he pulled over to have a cigarette. He said he'd been talking to her about the situation. She got out and ran off. Did you know she was upset at all or angry or?
No, because when I've spoken to him since then, he said that she just seemed moody. Like, because he's since told me that he said to me only a few days ago, he said, well, I'll be honest, he says, I did actually ask her why she lied.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing with him is he won't just go, oh, why did you lie? And then she's like, shrugs her shoulders.
Mm-hmm.
He'll go on about it and he'll be like, well, no, you don't shrug your shoulders, but why did you lie? And he'll press and press. And I can kind of get why he would ask that question. But I think with it being such a delicate matter, it should have just probably been left for maybe taken to the doctors or counselling or whatever to get to the bottom of.
Okay, so when he got home, how was he? What was his?
It was alright. He was drained, and I think he was just drained and tired, and he was upset by the whole situation. Because he was talking to me again, and he was crying, and he was scared. He was genuinely was scared for. Like I said, I can't even imagine how it must feel to have an allegation like that against you.
Mm-hmm.
And then, even though she then said, oh no, it's not true, but then to disappear doesn't exactly look good. But yeah, he was just scared and he was tired.
On the surface, there was a united front to cover up what had happened to Bernadette. But behind the scenes, things seemed to be unravelling. Scott was seen on CCTV, making multiple repeated visits to a lock-up garage in Walton. He also took Sarah with him on at least one late-night trip out into the countryside. This was perhaps to revisit a location from the crime, or maybe to potentially discard of some evidence. Truthfully, we'll never know. When police accessed Bernadette's digital footprint, they noticed that the activity didn't match her usual patterns. The messages sounded off, the voicing was just wrong, kind of mechanical. To make things even worse for Scott and Sarah, investigators would later find Bernadette's rucksack in that lockup that Scott was frequently visiting. And inside that bag sat her diary, her makeup, her phone, sanitary products, pretty much everything a teenage girl would have taken with her if she had truly run away. And in that diary was a heartbreaking entry. Told my mum about my dad and the abuse. She called me a liar and threatened to kill me if I told the police. That was the moment that enough was enough. It's pure tragedy that while she was alive, Bernadette's words held no power. But now that she was gone, they would finally be taken seriously. Scott Walker was finally arrested for Bernadette's murder and for perverting the course of justice.
Come on in.
Come on, that's well good anyway.
Okay. Full force.
Just bear with us, alright?
Yeah.
So that's it's 5 minutes past 2 on arrest for suspicion of sexual assault with a child and controlling coercive behaviour, okay?
Right.
That was anything very harm to don't mention one question, something which later on in court, anything you do so making evidence go.
Right.
So if your arrest is protected of vulnerable person. Alright?
Right.
We'll get at the station, we'll explain to you, silence will explain to you what will happen from there.
Yeah.
Just can
I just see Sarah?
No, not at the moment.
No.
We'll explain to her what's happened. So from now on, what's you're in okay? Alright?
We'll explain to her once you get to
No, I know, but it's all the kids.
I appreciate that. That's why I want to get you clearer here as quickly as possible.
And it's saying it's distressing, Scott, but unfortunately, going through it's a procedure we have to go through. Alright?
Yeah. I mean, we know all about the accusations and stuff.
What you need to do is let my colleague give you a search, okay?
This is where we explore it properly, okay? We can tick off some boxes, etc.
Yeah. Like, just remind you, Scott, you are under caution, so anything you do say, maybe you just
understand all that. Yeah. Well, I'll have a smoke before.
We'll let you have a smoke before you go in, alright?
Mother Sarah was also arrested for assisting in the cover-up. At trial, Scott continued to claim that Bernadette had simply run away. However, he offered no explanation as to why she hadn't used her bank card or social media since the day that he picked her up. In reality, this case was pretty cut and dry, apart from one thing. Police still didn't know the whereabouts of Bernadette's body, and Scott still refused to tell them. In July of 2021, the jury found Scott Walker guilty of murder. He was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 32 years. Sarah received 6 years for perverting the course of justice. Judge Justice McGowan addressed Scott directly, saying, "Your refusal to reveal the location of Bernadette's body means she can't be shown the respect that she deserves. Cruelest of all, it means some members of her family may go on hoping that she might come back." However, that long sentence meant pretty much nothing, because Scott Walker's time on this earth would come to an end in December of 2023. He never told anyone where Bernadette was buried. The inquest into his passing is still open, so I really don't know what happened, but fingers crossed it was something really bad. Anthony Walker still fights on bravely in his sister's memory. He never believed she ran away. He never stopped telling the truth. "I won't stop until I know the answer," he said. "I'll keep searching, because she doesn't deserve to be lying in a ditch somewhere." He called the man who took his sister a coward. He said he feels robbed, not just of a sister, but of a future that they had planned to share. The police say that their investigation remains open, but the truth is, until Bernadette is found, until she is laid to rest, none of this will ever truly be over.
Subject down over here.
Come here, come here.
I got him. Come here, baby. Come here. Come here, honey. I got possible suspect 14 when you're ready. White male, 6 foot to 6'2".
Who's the guy you saw? What did he look like? What is he wearing? So somebody up there said it was you.
No, none of us liked the idea, but none of us have actually heard him. He's a good kid. Was a good kid. Love him to death.
It was supposed to be the start of a new chapter. A quiet Sunday evening in Navarre, Florida. A young father stepping out of his car. A 4-year-old waiting just inside the doorway, excited for her first overnight visit with him in almost a year. Colby Vinson had just returned from the grocery store, 2 bags in his hands, a week's worth of plans in his head. But as he approached his apartment door, something felt off. The breezeway outside his building was usually empty at this hour, and tonight the air felt oddly still, like the whole complex was holding its breath. Colby didn't know it, but someone had been waiting for him, watching from the shadows, tracking his movements down to the minute. When he reached the door, he set one bag down inside for his daughter, and he turned to go back for the others. And that's when he froze. A man he didn't recognize stepped forwards. There were no words exchanged or threats made, just a single deliberate movement, quick, practiced and mechanical. Neighbors later said they heard what sounded like a door slamming. Others said it was more like a firecracker. All anyone knew for sure is that the next moment, the grocery bags were on the ground, and Colby was on the cold concrete. Inside the apartment, his daughter called out to him, but he couldn't respond. It would take only moments for the first 911 call to go out, but it would take far longer for the truth to surface. Investigators could not have predicted what they'd find when they uncovered the chain of decisions that led to a complete stranger to drive 5 hours, to cross a state line, and to lie in wait for a young father he had never even met. As random as this might sound, it wasn't. But it didn't start at the apartment that night. This final chapter started 6 days earlier. Buckle up, because things really kick off towards the end of this one. Here we go.
Let's do this. Ow.
6 days before that night in Navarre, a judge delivered a decision that should have been fair and simple. A step towards stability for a little girl who at the time was caught between 2 parents. Colby Vincent had fought for nearly a year to see his daughter again. He showed up to every hearing, he showed up to every mediation, every request for evaluation. In fact, he did everything that the court asked of him. And finally, on March the 12th, 2023, the judge granted him what he'd been waiting for, 50-50 custody. Colby walked out to the courthouse relieved, hopeful for the future. He sent a text message to his family with the good news, and they described him as lighter than he'd been in months.
Hello, and today I'm going to teach you how to open up your mailbox. Now it's a very simple thing to do. See, first you can walk, you can run, or you can jog, or you can ride your skateboard, or you can ride your bike. I'm gonna ride my skateboard. Let's go to my mailbox. Do-do-do-do-do-do. Going to the mailbox. Going to the mailbox. I'm going. I'm almost there.
But across town, someone else was having a very different reaction. Whilst Colby was celebrating, his former partner, 25-year-old Rachel Moore, was unraveling. Friends would later say that she had been made distraught by the court's ruling. Family members said that she wasn't simply upset, she was terrified of losing control. But the judge's ruling didn't take anything away from her. It only gave their daughter the chance to have both parents. Still though, that wasn't how Rachel saw it. Because almost immediately after the ruling, she picked up her phone. And then she contacted someone that most people didn't even know she still spoke to. Someone who had once been part of her family. Someone much older, someone who lived 5 hours away in Alabama. His name was Jason Curtis, and the messages that they exchanged that day, the tone, the timing, the things they said, all of it would later become very, very important. But back on May the 12th, nobody knew of any of this. Nobody knew that a single text message, sent just hours after the custody ruling, would set off a chain reaction. Before everything spiraled, Colby Vincent's world was simple. He worked hard, he loved being a dad, and according to everyone who knew him, that was one part of his identity that he really fought to protect. Friends described him as a kind of guy who would show up early, he would stay late, and he would make everyone laugh. Co-workers remembered him for his loud shoes, his bright smile, and the way that he talked about his daughter, Presley, like she was the best thing that had ever happened to him. But for nearly 10 months, he barely even got to see her. And this wasn't because of a court order. It wasn't because he was barred from visitation. It was because, according to court documents, Rachel just stopped allowing contact without going through the legal system. Colby, though, did exactly what the courts expected of him. He didn't retaliate. He didn't try to take matters into his own hands. He filed, he waited, he showed up to every hearing, even when nothing changed. And through all of it, he just kept one goal in mind. Just let me be her dad. His family remembers that time as the year everything went quiet. Because Colby wasn't the type of person to complain. He didn't lash out. He didn't wish to harm anyone. He just kept himself to himself, hoping that eventually things would work out. And on March the 12th, 2023, they finally did. The court saw no danger, no evidence of neglect, no reason to keep Colby from seeing his daughter, and so they granted shared custody, and Colby's first scheduled pickup was set for March the 19th. His family remembers how excited he was. Co-workers said that he was planning cookouts, he'd bought games, he wanted to take his daughter on walks on the beach, everything you might want to do with a 4-year-old who idolizes you and you idolize them. Even on that very morning, the day that he would pick Presley up for the first time in nearly a year, his family received a text from him. "Thank you, we're both happy." And those short, positive words would be the last that he ever sent. Because whilst Colby was preparing for a week of normal fatherhood, someone else was preparing for something very different. Someone who believed the court's decision was a threat. Someone who believed that Colby should not get that week, or any week thereafter. And because of that belief, a plan began forming in the background, quietly, quickly, and with a level of clarity that would later shock investigators. Nobody around Colby knew it yet, not his friends nor his family, definitely not Colby himself. But the very moment he won custody, The countdown had already begun. That same afternoon that Colby walked out to the courtroom relieved, Rachel Moore opened up her phone and sent a message that would change everything. She contacted her former stepfather, Jason Curtis, a man living 5 hours away in Coleman, Alabama. Their relationship wasn't close. They didn't speak regularly, but on March the 12th, she had one topic on her mind, the custody ruling. What she told him and how he responded is what prosecutors would later call the blueprint. According to testimony, the conversation shifted almost instantly from venting to something far darker. Jason wrote something that made investigators pause when they read it. A comment about coming down there and hunting Colby down. A normal person would treat that as a red flag, maybe even a threat. But Rachel did not shut this down. She didn't say, "No, stop." She didn't say, "I don't want that." Instead, she replied with something that prosecutors highlighted again and again. "Not much hunting. I have an address." And with that one sentence, Colby's safety was now gone. Jason responded by sending her a picture, and no, it wasn't a selfie or anything like that. Instead, it was of weapons, sharp weapons, firearms, a sword, and a caption that would later give jury the chills. Take your pick. To prosecutors, this wasn't small talk. It wasn't simply frustration. What they planned next was not impulsive. It was not emotional. It doesn't even seem like they tried to hide it. This was deliberate and documented, and investigators would later say the most chilling part of all of this was just how casual they were. The messages between Rachel and Jason, they didn't read like panic. They read like premeditation, but there were still more details to come. Investigators later recovered 2 small pieces of paper from Jason's belongings. On them were notes, almost like scouting cards, listing Colby's height, weight, hair, tattoos, his car, workplace, and apartment number. Where did he get that information, you may ask? From Rachel. She also sent him directions. She told him where Colby did his shopping and when he would have custody of their daughter, Presley. The more the two talked, the clearer the picture became. Gas money was offered, $50, a promise that everything would be fine, a reassurance that Jason just needed to take care of it. All of this happened in the days between the court case and March the 19th, and all of this was a trail of evidence. They laid out steps, concrete ones, deliberate ones, and while Colby spent his week preparing snacks, games, cleaning his apartment, and getting ready for the arrival of his daughter, Rachel and Jason spent theirs preparing for something else entirely. And by the time March the 19th arrived, the plan was not simply made, it was already in motion. March the 19th, 2023, a Sunday. Warm, quiet, and otherwise unremarkable, unless you knew that something was happening behind the scenes. At around midday, Jason Curtis got into his vehicle in Coleman, Alabama. He brought with him a .38 caliber Ruger, a handwritten note containing Colby's description and addresses, and according to prosecutors, a very clear purpose. 5 hours. That's how long the drive was to Navarre, Florida. 5 hours of interstate. 5 hours of rural Alabama, then into the Florida Panhandle. 5 long hours to think about what he was about to do. Along the way, county license plate cameras captured him passing through small towns. Crestview, Milton, silent yet reliable digital witnesses. At the time, nobody could have known the significance of those blurry images, but detectives would later say that those camera pings became the backbone of the timeline. Meanwhile, Colby was having a completely normal day. He picked up his daughter from the Publix parking lot. He sent his family the message. He bought groceries for the week, snacks, cereal, things that his daughter liked, and he carried them up to the apartment, one armful at a time. He had no idea that a man was waiting for him. Jason arrived in Navarre while the sun was setting. He drove into the Cayo Grande apartment complex. He parked up, and then, according to prosecutors, he waited. He waited until the exact moment that Colby returned home with Presley. These details aren't guesses. Investigators could piece them together from surveillance footage, timestamps, and the physical evidence later recovered, including the shell casing found in Jason's home. At approximately 9:30 p.m, Colby carried the first load of groceries inside. Presley walked ahead of him. She was understandably excited. She hadn't stayed with her dad overnight in nearly a year. When Colby stepped back outside to grab the second load, Jason approached from the breezeway. The distance between them was only a few feet. Assistant State Attorney Mark Alderman later told the jury he walked up to Colby and fired one shot in his face. No struggle or chase, just a single, calculated, devastating act. Colby fell backwards onto the concrete. The groceries spilled. The lights from his apartment cast long shadows across the walkway. Inside, Presley called out to her father. Jason just turned, walked back to his car, and drove away. According to the testimony, within 30 minutes of the act, he called Rachel and told her, "You don't have to worry about it."
Sheriff's Office Emergency.
Hello, I just got off the phone with a family member that said that they just saw someone get shot at the apartments we live in, Cayo Grande.
Within just minutes of the 911 call, the Santa Rosa County Sheriff's Office descended on the complex. What they found would haunt deputies for a long time.
Subject down over here.
Come here, come here.
I got him. Come here, baby. Come here. Come here, honey. One of our guys took her. Who grabbed the juvenile? Harbaugh had it. She's what, 3-ish? 2 to 3, yeah. She's very young. Yeah,
Colby was lying there, groceries scattered, his 4-year-old daughter sitting beside him, crying for her dad. Sheriff Bob Johnson later described the scene in blunt, emotional terms. To shoot somebody with their 4-year-old child right there, it goes beyond anything I've ever seen.
Hello. Did you hear anything?
I heard literally, before I heard your guys' radio, I just heard people yelling.
Okay.
That was it. It sounded just like a man yelling.
You heard a man?
That was it.
Okay. You didn't see anything or anything
Nope,
like that?
I've been sitting inside.
Did you hear anything that sounded loud like a gunshot?
Yes.
Oh.
I thought it was my trash can popping. Hey, how long ago did I say did the dogs go crazy?
Possible suspect 14 when you're ready. White male, 6 foot to 6'2".
Who's the guy you saw? What did he look like? What is he wearing? Somebody up there said it was you.
My granddaughter came to stay with her dad for the first night in every year. And
is Colby okay?
Colby is not okay. Colby is deceased.
What?
So that's why this is imperative that we try to figure out as much information about what's been going on with him lately. In regards to custody, is there anybody that would have wanted to harm Colby in regards to that?
No, none of us liked the idea, but none of us have actually hurt him. I mean, that's ridiculous.
Detectives worked quickly. Witness statements, camera footage, phone records, and then the breakthrough. 2 days after doing what he did, Jason Curtis was tracked down and arrested in Coleman, Alabama. Inside his vehicle, investigators found what they believed was the murder weapon, and next to it a handwritten note containing Colby's height, weight, vehicle, workplace, and home address. This was evidence that didn't just implicate him, it connected up the dots of the whole plan. Back in Florida, detectives interviewed Rachel Moore, and her story changed multiple times. At first, she feigned surprise, said she didn't know who could have done this. She even asked whether her daughter would be returned to her custody.
So we went to court and the judge had a death in the family and it got moved up. And then my side of the case wasn't even allowed to be seen in the court. And then they told me 50-50 sharing and I said, okay. And then I showed up, I dropped my kid off, and then at midnight I'm getting a call saying, hey, answer the front door. And I answer the door and there's deputies saying, hey.
What time did you drop her off?
6:30.
6:30? And where was that at?
Publix. But I knew to be there because...
That's in the bar?
Yeah, it says it right here. I got an email from my attorney that said this. We didn't have to communicate. We knew where, when. I just had to accept it, so I did. I was not expecting deputies to show back up at my house the same night.
But investigators already had her text messages. They recovered deleted conversations. They had the gas money payment and her directions given to Jason. They even had evidence of the promises she made. I'll pay you $50 for the gas.
Do you know what caused her to stop letting him see Presley?
He used to only have one off day, which was Saturday. So he would go get her every Saturday, spend time with her, and take her back. He then got his schedule fixed so that he could have like 2 consecutive off days. And he wanted Presley to spend the night. He got a little toddler bed for her and some other things, and she said no. And he was trying to just handle everything without getting attorneys involved, and she wouldn't let him see her, so we hired an attorney. And then once she was served, she cut off all contact.
By April of 2024, both she and Jason Curtis were charged with first-degree premeditated murder. Jason Curtis went to trial first. The evidence was overwhelming. Weapons photos, text messages, surveillance hits, the .38 caliber shell casing found at his home, and his own police interview.
Jason, do you think it's a weird coincidence that we're up here talking to you? I mean, I don't want you to
Not really, not after everything that was going on.
You don't think it's a surprise that we're up here talking to you?
Not for something like that, I wouldn't.
What do you mean for something like that?
Well, if he was killed, I'm sure he'll look into every angle possibility.
Right, but do you think it's a weird coincidence that you're in handcuffs regarding that?
Yeah,
What kind of information did Rachel share with you?
All she said was the court ruled in his favor.
Rachel was positive that the system and the government failed her, right? Her time of need.
Yeah.
So she calls her stepdad, who makes her feel comfortable who reached out to take care of her, right?
Do all I can.
So what did you do to help take care of her?
I'm not going to go to jail the rest of my life for something I did not do.
But you're going to let Rachel?
If
That's
she's
how much you love
guilty,
her.
there's nothing I can do about it.
So it's an accident that we're sitting in front of you?
No, it's not.
Okay, so tell me why it's not an accident that you're in that chair right there in handcuffs.
Because you believe I shot somebody?
How'd you know the victim was shot? No one told you that.
They did. They told me that this morning.
Who did?
The guy that had me down on the highway, it was 69 highway when I was arrested. I said, what am I arrested for?
Murder.
Yeah.
A 12-member jury deliberated, and Judge Clifton Drake delivered the sentence. Life in prison, no parole. He was transferred to the Florida Department of Corrections and now serves his life sentence at a Panhandle institution. 1 year later, Rachel would face her own jury. Rachel was convicted as a principal to first-degree murder and of tampering with evidence. Judge Drake sentenced her to life without parole, housed at Laurel Correctional Institution in Ocala. A third person, Christina Moore, Rachel's mother and Jason's ex-wife, she initially faced charges of accessory after the fact, but in 2025, prosecutors dropped the case, citing new evidence that made the conviction essentially impossible. And so today, 2 people are serving life sentences, but Colby's family are left struggling to get answers. How did a custody ruling, something meant to give a little girl her father back, lead to a calculated 5-hour journey in a horrifying act that was meticulously planned through messages that the people involved believed would never be seen? For Colby's family, the loss is immeasurable. His mother, Megan, said it best: "My son's last day on this earth plays in my head on repeat. I can't escape it, no matter what I do." And yet, through the heartbreak, they hold on to one truth, the same truth that Colby held on to every day. He just wanted to be a dad, and he was until the end.
If you want more tips on how to do everyday household things, just leave a comment in the section below. Bye!
In the heart of Kilclare Gardens, a working-class neighbourhood in the southern reaches of Dublin, lived the Mulhall family. John and Kathleen Mulhall were parents to 3 boys and 3 girls. Kathleen, whose roots trace back to the travelling community as Kathleen Ward, faced maltreatment within her marriage to John. Linda Mulhall, aged 30, had a troubled life. She was unemployed, she left school early, and she had to care for 4 children after her relationship with their father ended. She entered another relationship with Wayne Kinsella, a man who frequently maltreated them all. This included physically harming the children with an electrical flex cable. Social services intervened, placing the children in care, and Kinsella served a 7-year prison sentence for his crime. Linda, with a history of alcohol addiction and substance use, had a larceny conviction from 1993. At age 21, Charlotte Mulhall, Linda's sister, also had a troubled history marked by substance and alcohol misuse. This was as well as several minor convictions for criminal damage and public order offences. She was also involved in low-end escorting. In 2002, Kathleen, the mother of Charlotte and Linda, began a relationship with Farah Noor while still living with her husband, John Mulhall. Farah Noor, who had immigrated to Ireland in December of 1996 under the guise of Shalila Salim from Somalia, claimed his family had perished in the Somali civil war. However, investigations into his background disclosed his Kenyan identity, along with the truth that his wife and 2 children were in fact still alive. Initially, he was going to be deported, but an appeal granted him Irish citizenship in 1999. This was due to his status as the father of an Irish-born child. Farah's history reveals a series of offences. There were past convictions for intoxication, threatening behaviour and assault. This was along with a deeply disturbing case, a case of violating a mentally disabled 16-year-old Chinese girl. This happened in 1997, which resulted in her giving birth to a son. Additionally, 2 other women bore children through assault by him. His criminal record includes multiple charges of disorderly conduct and assault. These even involved a violation with a sharp implement present at the scene, an event which led to 3 convictions. Remarkably, despite these offences, Farah never served time in jail. As mentioned before, the Mulhall's marriage was filled with violence and cruelty. John heavily maltreated Kathleen and the children. Kathleen had already gone through 10 years of a toxic marriage, and on top of it, she found out that John was cheating on her. Despite all of this, as a stay-at-home mother, she felt trapped and was afraid of leaving because of financial insecurities. Seeking help, she started socializing, and then she met Farah. In him, she found the affection and care that she so desperately craved. Wanting to break free from the unhealthy marriage, she asked John to leave, but he refused. Eventually, she reported him to the police, and this made John Mulhall finally leave the home. Farah then moved in, initially a situation that was bringing happiness into the home, but soon he revealed his true nature as a violent alcoholic. The decision to move to Cork was a hope for a fresh start for Kathleen and Farah. They attempted to move far away from the family rift. However, the situation did not improve. In fact, it worsened. With no witnesses, Farah would treat Kathleen even worse than John did. While he stayed at home, Farah found a job in Cork. He left her confined in a bedroom during his work hours, confined to hide the bruises and injuries inflicted by him. Kathleen spent her days in bed. She was left alone, pondering the prior night's events that triggered Farah's anger. She hoped that changing herself and avoiding provocation might stop the attacks. After all, despite this mistreatment, she still harbored a love for Farah. Kathleen, enduring severe wounds from Farah's abuse, decided to secretly get medical help. She often claimed that she had been robbed to explain her severe injuries. After 2 years away, she and Farah returned to Dublin, with Kathleen hopeful that the change would rekindle Farah's more compassionate side. Unfortunately, during a night out, their celebratory mood soured into an argument. This culminated in Farah physically assaulting Kathleen in public view. The fortunate presence of a police car allowed officers to witness the altercation in broad daylight. And despite Kathleen's pleading, the police detained Farah. However, because Kathleen refused to cooperate or provide a statement, the police were unable to intervene effectively. Even though they saw him physically harming her, the absence of Kathleen's testimony left them unable to hold him, and this eventually resulted in his release. Kathleen's children, however, had different reactions. Some of them, like Marie and Andrew, were upset and moved in with John, while Charlotte supported her mother out of deep love and devotion. She didn't want to leave her alone. Living with Farah exposed Kathleen to his alter ego, transforming him from a kind soul in the morning to a violent man when under the influence in the evening. On the eve of Charlotte's 22nd birthday in 2005, Kathleen and Farah celebrated St. Patrick's Day by drinking heavily and wandering off the streets of Dublin city centre. Farah decided not to go to work that day. His boss called in to ask him why he hadn't shown up, but it was Kathleen who answered the phone and explained that their child was sick. That obviously was not true. Kathleen and Farah had been drinking throughout the entire day. The two then called Charlotte, inviting her to join them in the city centre. Linda, Charlotte's sister, wasn't keen on joining them, but she was convinced by Charlotte. Kathleen and Farah were already intoxicated upon their arrival. Farah bought vodka and Kathleen bought Coca-Cola. They drank it while strolling through the city before settling at the River Liffey boardwalk. There, Charlotte and her mother took illicit party substances. Upon returning to Kathleen's flat, the women took even more of this substance. Kathleen discreetly crushed a tablet into Farah's drink. They wanted to make sure that they were all under the influence of the same thing. Linda, Farah, and Charlotte were sitting closely together on a two-seater couch. Then, Farah started inappropriately touching Linda. He even whispered into her ear and put his arms around her waist, refusing to let her go. Kathleen, rightly so, erupted into anger. She engaged in a heated argument with Farah. Then, in the heat of the moment, Kathleen told her daughters to just end his life for her. And they did just that. Charlotte grabbed a sharp implement. She then struck Farah across the throat. This caused him to collapse. Linda then took a heavy object, repeatedly striking him on the head, all while their mother, Kathleen, observed the scene without lifting a finger. That day, Farah sustained a total of at least 27 wounds, but possibly even more. The act was done. It was time to come up with a plan to hide the man's now lifeless body. Farah was subsequently dismembered. The women decided not to dispose of the head in a canal to avoid possible identification. Instead, they carried the head via bus to Tallaght, passing through the Square shopping centre en route to Timon North Park. In the park, Charlotte used a sharp implement to dig a hole, and there they intended to bury the head. Kathleen discarded of the sharp implements and heavy objects used in the attack in a nearby pond. Later, allegedly, Linda returned to the park, dug up the head, and transported it in her son's school bag to a field in the Killinarden estate, also in Tallaght. Using another heavy object, she then shattered it, before going on to bury it again to make sure there wasn't any trace of this horrific crime. Everything went unnoticed until, that is, 10 days later, when a leg, still clothed in a sock, was found floating in the canal near to Croke Park. It was initially mistaken for a discarded mannequin due to the sock concealing signs of decay. The leg caught the attention of a passerby who then informed the police. Police divers discovered more of Farah's dismembered body in 7 parts, eventually identifying him through a media-driven identification appeal. The crucial breakthrough in linking Noor to the Mulhall women came from a Somali man after recognizing a t-shirt on the recovered torso. Farah's head and private parts were never recovered. Following their arrest in August of 2005, the Mulhall family firmly denied any knowledge of the events. However, Linda later reached out to the investigating officers. She confessed her involvement in the crime. This confession, made in the same month at her residence in Tallaght, significantly changed the course of the investigation, an investigation which had previously made limited headway. Subsequent searches of the Mulhall flat in Summerhill revealed bloodstains matching Farah Noor's DNA to that of the DNA discovered in the body parts. After Linda's confession, Kathleen fled the country in September of 2005. She lived in England until authorities located her again in January of 2008. In the legal proceedings, Linda and Charlotte were charged with murder. They stood trial in the Central Criminal Court. The trial occurred in October of 2006, resulting in Linda Mulhall being convicted of manslaughter. Her defense focused in on provocation. The jurors accepted Linda's defense, which led to her conviction on the lesser charge of manslaughter, while Charlotte was convicted of the murder of Farah Noor. Following the trial, Charlotte Mulhall received a mandatory life sentence, while Linda Mulhall was sentenced to 15 years for manslaughter. The judge paid attention to Linda's substance addiction, noting her attempt to disrupt the trial by refusing to take her methadone. Both sisters were denied leave to appeal their sentences. Linda appealed the severity of her sentence, arguing that it was delivered without crucial psychiatric and probation reports. However, this appeal was unsuccessful, as the Court of Criminal Appeal upheld the initial sentence. After serving over 12 years of her 15-year term, Linda was released in 2018. She chose to keep a low profile and, in July of the same year, when approached by a reporter, she expressed her desire to move on with her life. She declined to make further comment.